episode of my live content UX audit series. So we are getting started here. I will do what I always do, which is make sure that it's working. And sometimes it isn't, and sometimes it turns into a recording. But so far, so good. It says we're live. I'm just double checking LinkedIn to see if that'll give me any hints here as to showing up there. I haven't been scheduling these, so with that in mind, it's just kind of like a different process to see if everything's working. And so far LinkedIn is not showing that it is working, so I am not totally sure what's happening today. But I think we will go ahead and move forward, and at least I'll have the recording. No, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so today I wanted to focus on just double checking one other thing. I think it's just taking its time to get to where it needs to go. But so today I wanted to focus on something a little bit different than what I normally do, which is focusing on a case study piece of content instead of kind of like the typical article that we've been going over. And so what I say every time, if you'd like to submit your content for review during these live content UX audits, you can use this link at the bottom of the screen, blogsmith.tips/content-UX. And yeah, it is still just not working, but it is what it is. What can you do? So we will go ahead and actually it is working. I don't know. I feel like something's changed with how it gets shown on different platforms. But anyway, so let's go ahead and dive in, and I can kind of explain why this focus today and who I've chosen to audit. So, as you'll see here, this is BigCommerce's website. They're a client that I've worked with in the past. And I just was poking around and kind of looking at some of their different resources and their case studies specifically. I picked this one because it seemed like an interesting topic, and just to kind of give you a background about like the Blogsmith and our approach. So you could see some examples of case studies that we've worked on for clients. This is the link to our portfolio on our website, and you can look down and see some of the different clients that we've helped, some of the different topics that we've covered, and some of the different approaches that we've taken. So there's that. And then also just in terms of like methodology and action, these are case studies with our clients. And so, you know, applying a lot of those same methodologies that we used with writing on behalf of our clients, but for our purpose. So some examples there. And then I might be referencing this one just as kind of like, again, an example of what it looks like in actuality, you know, why we added certain things as we discuss this BigCommerce audit that we're going to do today. All right, so looking at starting from the top here, I've always appreciated that BigCommerce's navigation is like very simple, non-obtrusive, and it kind of just like gets straight into the point and in content. And so as you can see, this particular case study is for, actually, let me change this really quick. Oh, never mind, it did. I put it on the right screen. This one's from embroidery supply and design stitches. And so I'll be so honest with you that this is like a world outside of what I understand. I'm not their target customer. It sounded like it was kind of fun, an e-commerce store for something that's, you know, a little bit more of a classical hobby. So combining that sort of like offline with the online in an interesting way and in a profitable way as described here. So I always got to say, like, when I don't see the Oxford comma, we have some clients that in their style guides say specifically not to use it, and I always think that that's funny and interesting. But yeah, as you can see here, it looks like BigCommerce is one of them. I think that it changes meaning, so I just like to call it out because it kind of like it really, yeah, I mean, without getting into it, it just means a different thing without it. One thing that I thought was interesting, especially because they have like this request a demo button here, they also have this watch product tour. And so I followed that and I was kind of curious about it. And so it leads to this page, you know, a landing page where you can grab access to essentially a video, and they describe it as a 17-minute video. It's interesting. I kind of wonder, like, is that compelling? 17 minutes of my time to essentially take myself through a demo. I mean, it all depends on how buyers react really at the end of the day. Like, would they prefer this to engaging with a salesperson? Probably, but is 17 minutes a long time to sort of like invest as like a first time getting to know a brand? Quite possibly. So yeah, just something that I noticed there, something I called out. There must be something to it if they've included it, but again, it's at like 17 minutes that kind of throws it off for me. Maybe if it was a 7-minute product tour, then to me that would make more sense than engaging with this before I'm ready to talk to them. So as we go down, I'm always interested in the methodology behind like what numbers get chosen to show at the beginning of a case study. And so this is probably a good time to bring up an example of ours. And in this case, you know, for this client, we were focused on organic traffic metrics. So that's what we led with. But something here, and again, part of this is maybe like I have a very good understanding of like website building and launching and things like that. I have maybe less of an understanding of how that looks with like a huge e-commerce site, as they say, you know, 85,000 SKUs. So, you know, 90 days to launch, maybe that is like a really good number here within the context of how big the website is. But outside of that, if you're using, you know, like a managed platform, to me, that's kind of long. I don't know. So all I mean is like, maybe this makes sense to their ideal buyer. But it seems, how do I say, I'm not totally sure what story they're trying to tell here. This to me is maybe the most compelling, that they were able to increase conversions by like implementing a better search they get into as we go through the study. But it just seems like it's almost like 3 different stats, or like maybe this has to do with this and this has to do with that. I don't know. I'm just kind of like pointing out that I'm not totally, the numbers themselves and the layers, they just don't fully together for me here. So then we get into the content itself. I like that it's like kind of, you know, like focused and centered so that you can like really get into it. It's nice to have like that padding so that you're just looking at like a long line of text that spans the whole browser. One thing I will say is the light gray text is a little bit harsh to read, again, depending on who the target audience is. If it were older crowd, I would say you definitely want it to be like sharper and darker, but may or may not matter, just pointing it out. So we start to kind of like get the story of this brand. And it's a family-owned business. It caters to embroiderers and crafters. And so I think that's a really interesting story. But as you kind of scroll through, like that's almost like the only mention of like the family-owned nature of it and kind of like the unique designs. I mean, they probably talk about it a little bit, you know, throughout like with the products and stuff, such as in this feature. But it seems like as I scroll through, there's a missed opportunity to sort of merchandise and showcase this family-owned, crafty nature. That's something that I would expect to hear. And again, like we're talking about the intersection, the merging of like this, like, you know, offline craft with like the online way that they sell it. And it seems like that would be something fun to showcase visually, essentially. And I think something like, you know, like heavily produced video might be outside the scope for most brands that are creating case studies, but even having some video elements here where there are a lot of different people who weigh in, and I want to talk about that. But having, you know, specifically, for example, like this person who represents the brand itself that this case study is about, having like a quick sort of like video testimonial, that's something that we built into our case study to just add another like layer, in addition to other visuals, as, you know, like featuring products, making, you know, quotes visually interesting, you know, adding other things like analytics data and stuff like that. But so that it's not just text. I think that that's one thing that I'm noticing. This big commerce case study is it is a lot of text. They have some visual features, but it could be broken up, I think, more effectively and in a more visually way. So let's see, what was I going to say next? notably, a lot of the subheadings are, crafting, threading. You could say tailored is kind of having to do with sewing. Or you could say that it's kind of a buzzword, depending. But I think the use case here, also with like seamless, is kind of like in this vein of this like craftiness. Yeah, sewing up satisfaction, enhancing UX one stitch at a time. It's cute. There's a part of me that likes kind of like the kitschiness of that, the brandedness of relating it back to the customer. I also think that subheadings should be very descriptive of the text that follows. And so I think they do that. I think it's just a reminder. Like for example, again, I'm not like a crafty person, but threading the needle of a thriving brand, it's like, I'm not totally what that means. So maybe it's because I'm not a crafter, but my understanding is like when you're sewing, when you thread the needle, you're kind of like getting started, it's like the next step. I don't really understand what that means here. And so sometimes like when we try to have fun with subheadings and stuff, it can get a little bit convoluted in terms of actual meaning. So I'm just calling that out. All right, let's see here. So we get it. So this is kind of like the intro, the summary, and here's where we're starting, right? And then we get into the change. And so essentially this brand, Oklahoma Embroidery Supply and Design, worked with an agency to help them implement. I'm actually not sure if they used BigCommerce before. It's not totally clear based on reading this. But whether or not they used BigCommerce before, they were essentially, this case study is them adding functionality to the store with this technology partner, Vu. Okay. So, and specifically Vu, as we go through, and I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, discusses kind of how it's helped to, like as they say up here, improve like the experience. And so let's just see here. Yeah, so they're talking about how they wanted to modernize their website and improve the shopper experience. Here's who they did that with. This is still like that original customer talking about that process. So something like this quote, I think, could be so much more visually engaging with like a headshot or maybe a visual emphasis. It's at least a different size text and has like the capitalization. But I don't know that I would use capitalization for anything longer than a very short heading, because that's also kind of like a reader experience problem. So anyway, I think there are ways, and you don't have to do it exactly like with it, but maybe to create a visual that serves as the quote, for example, again, just to visually break it up and make it more scroll worthy. That's a challenge. That's the solution. And I also wanted to call out, there is kind of like a formula of sorts when it comes to creating case study pages. The way that we handled it, like particularly on this one and differently for other customers, was we separated it by the challenges, the strategy, which is just like us being able to address how we handled the challenges or how we solved the challenges, and then the results, which is like, the tangible things that happened after we worked together to address those challenges. So they split it into challenge and solution. So you could say that like solution also kind of contains the strategy, but that's just like a nice way to break it up and to be able to tell the story, because, ultimately of the day, BigCommerce published this, right? So they want to be positioning themselves in, a good way. And so that also brings me to my next point, which is like, who is this case study really for, I guess, right? Because it's on BigCommerce website. It uses BigCommerce, right? But we're talking about this brand and we're talking about this agency partner. And really most of this case study is actually focused on their technology part. And so my thesis is that it's actually the technology partner who commissioned this case study, right? And, in partnership with BigCommerce put this together. But it is a little bit confusing as I'm reading through this BigCommerce site. And it's like, it's just kind of passing mentions of the tool itself. Like if we were to kind of like look throughout, it's like, okay, so we mentioned BigCommerce at the beginning, no mention for like several scrolls. It's here, which, they're basically saying that it allowed, some specific customization. It's mentioned here, which is the same quote. It's mentioned at the end when we get to results. So that's kind of where it comes together. But it's kind of like BigCommerce is absent from like the challenge. Well, and maybe they don't challenge, but as part of like the solution itself before we get to the results. Oh, and so they kind of do have that, right? Well, they have challenges, and instead of strategy, they called it solution and then results. So yeah, they followed a very similar way of doing it. Just combining or just addressing that. So let's see, we end off. So we're kind of up here, and let's just see some of the things that I wanted to discuss. You can certainly read through this case study yourself and draw conclusions. But again, most of it is focused on this technology partner, which was probably their intention. So we've talked about the technology partner and the agency partner, and then we feature them here. It kind of feels like something, I think in general, confusion happens when you mention something like in passing, like really early on, but then you kind of wait to elaborate on it. And so something like this was just like an at a glance. I think that belongs probably maybe even at the beginning of the solution, to just say like, it's kind of like, here's where we're going, right? Like here's like that guiding a compass of sorts, like a table of contents, but it's like, here's what we're going to talk about, and now here we are talking about it. Something like that. What else I want to say here? So then here we do have some visuals, and I do like this treatment where it's like I can see the website. It's a different background color, sort of text treatment of sorts. So it really does pop. I am kind of wondering why it's, several scrolls down. And we do also have this visual, right, of the website. But it's like, if this is really about Oklahoma embroidery supply and design, the solutions that either BigCommerce or Clevu or this partner solved, then why is like the main mention of how it ends up looking rather, why is that like so far down here? So that's just a thought I had. What else? So yeah, now we started to get into like the real BigCommerce mentions, and they mentioned that it's a collaboration. That's something that probably should have been said kind of at the beginning, and they probably do in a sense, but cleanly like this, where it's like, this is a case study that lays out a really like awesome collaboration between our platform and then this brand and the different partners that they have worked in terms of, just like creating the experience, but also like the tools. Yeah, I feel like that should kind of be at the beginning to set the stage for why there are so many different players and how it starts to get a little bit confusing as to like, what is ultimately the point? So I might have some other notes, but I will go through a couple last thoughts here. I published data. I think that's always important. Contextualizes, especially when we're talking about technology. We can kind of say like, it was technology that made sense around this time when it was published. It might not make as much sense, a year or two from now, because there may be changes. And so that, may necessitate some sort of update here, right? Depending on what this company does to adjust technology as necessary, and if they need to, because again, it is, this sort of like, like crafty brand, they probably are looking for a solution that they don't have to switch too often. And so hopefully they've found this. At the bottom, we have this see more on these topics. This is language that I'm actually trying to really avoid, like in the content I'm creating, like see, because, sometimes people accessing websites are using tools like screen readers because they can't see. And so it's kind of odd, right? Where it's like see more, but they can't. So what I would suggest is maybe more like, see more on, or not see more, read more related stories. And then, but that begs the question of like, we also have this. And so this is categories or tags. And then these are, I don't know what's driving it exactly. But this one's embroidery, this one's like shirts. So it's probably like related categories to this idea of like crafting, physical products, clothing, that. So it's like, do we need both? But either way, I would just relabel this one, I think, is all I'm trying to say. Going back up, I'm just looking at some notes I took for myself. So yeah, we have this this thing that I was talking about, which I think we should move to the beginning. But I also feel like we talk about Clevu a lot. So why not just have some sort of like call out box, maybe like a similar gray, it could be a similar texture that's literally just like, what is Clevu? Like, let's just, since we're going to talk about it a lot, let's just like define it, because this is just a list. So it doesn't, so even this list, I would say, needs probably like a one sentence-ish description of what each of these things actually are, to give context, to give at a glance text. Yeah, I think that was pretty much what I had for this one. So yeah, I mean, case studies, they're different than articles. There are competing interests that have to be managed, right? Because it's whoever provided the solution and whoever sought the solution, and potentially, as in this case, the different sort of like tools and partners that got involved. And also, like, case studies, I think it's really easy to create them in such a way that's like very focused on the words themselves, which I'm always a fan of. But you have to think about, what's the actual usefulness of this asset, right? Because most people are creating case studies to help with the bottom of the funnel, to help with sales. And, in order for it to do its job, I think it has to keep people engaged. And so just adding some more visuals, and that I think also helps it be more share worthy too, like on things like social. I think it would also, like in this case, it would make the brands involved maybe want to share it more. So yeah, I think, lots to say about case studies. I'll probably do another one of these again soon, but just wanted to break up format a little bit from the articles we usually do. So once again, I will end off by saying that you can submit your content for a future live content UX audit using this URL at the bottom of the screen. I'll flip the screen one more time to, since I didn't address this at the bottom of this, you can access our style guide, which is blogsmith.tips/style-guide, where, we have documented a lot of the types of things that I'm saying and how to kind of like approach it formulaically in the sense, but just to create standards that make it easy to these things. So thank you for joining and watching if you are seeing the recording. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to do this again next week. I'm right about to get to the point of holiday travel and chaos. But I'm aiming to do at least one more before the holidays, and I will look